Welcome to the Heart of Giving. As you know, we have the nonprofits in this city highlighted so you know the wonderful things they do. And you know, many times people will stop and ask me, you know, I'd like to start a nonprofit. I don't understand, how do you start one? You know, what do you do? I've got some good ideas I'd like to put in place. Well, we're changing our format a little bit. And I have someone today I'd like to introduce to you who can give us some good answers. And that's Terrence McNally from MessageMatters. And he has a very interesting background, which I'm going to ask him about. But he also has a message that I think for nonprofits is very, very important. So if you're interested in that, be sure you don't turn off your dial. Is it a dial? Anyway, whatever it is. But Terrence, I'm glad that you're here today, and thank you so much. And I'm so glad that your message is going to be heard, because this is something that anybody that wants to talk about and explain about needs. So nice to have you today.
Thank you. It's great
Terrence
to be
McNally.
here.
So, but you know, I think that people would be interested in your background, because I was. How did you get to be, you don't have to tell us what you're doing right now. What did you do before you got to this place?
Well, I originally started as a school teacher.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, in Massachusetts, in the Boston area. And after a few years, I decided I was going to come out to Los Angeles to reach larger audiences.
Oh, the entertainment world?
Through the entertainment
my.
industry.
Okay.
And over the course of about 20 years, I acted a lot in television, some movies. I produced, I wrote screenplays. The one movie that I got made was Earth Girls Are Easy.
Oh my.
Jeff Goldblum, Gina Davis.
I don't know what that means, but okay.
Jim Carrey, Damon Wayans. It was Jim Carrey and Damon Wayans' first film. And so I did, as I say, about 20 years in the entertainment industry, and at a certain point I began to get involved with nonprofits. And I will actually tell you the incident that led to that, which is I had attended Harvard, and I went back for my 20th reunion, and I ended up making a speech, and my speech was about, you know, sort of our career paths. And I was saying, you know, how are we living up to our youthful ideals? Because I'd gone to college in the late 60s when there was, you know, we were out to save the world. Mm-hmm. And when I came back, I don't know whether my speech affected anyone else, but it affected me.
You, yeah.
And so then
I
got
what am I doing with my life?
Yeah. So I was still in the entertainment industry for a number of years, but I got involved with environmental nonprofits and education nonprofits, and you know, began to help organize them and so on. And then as I transitioned out of the entertainment industry, I began to consult to nonprofits. And what I did at first was I had a gift, or I was pretty good at getting people to understand each other. So what I did at first was I did board retreats. I would facilitate the board retreat or a strategic planning process or a big meeting and that sort of thing. And I did that for a number of years. And then I saw really that what I had done in the entertainment industry could be very helpful. And so then I began to shift to what I do now, which is that I help organizations tell better stories, develop their narratives. So all that stuff, as I say, that was, I mean, what I believe is that, so I taught, I wrote, I directed, I produced, all those things come into play when you're trying to reach people
with your message.
as a nonprofit. I also have done radio interview. I've had a radio interview show for 20 years. Well, that's, again, the same thing. The best interviews are going to be the ones where someone knows to tell a story.
Yeah. So what is your message?
My message is, I'll tell you, I'm going to put it in two messages.
Okay.
I talk primarily, what I work with organizations about is communications. The first one, the basic one, is when I point to my PowerPoints, I always say, this is the most important slide. I believe that the thing human beings want more than anything is to feel seen and heard. And so when you are working with your own staff, with your board, and when you're reaching out to approach funders or approach allies or build alliances or anything like that, or policy, affect
Or
policy.
get new members on your board.
All of that. You got to know that you got to make sure you're listening, that the most important part of communication is not what you say. It's that you listen and that you take people in, and then you'll create a dynamic that works. So that's the foundation for all communication. But the other thing that I really that is the most popular piece of what I do is to help organizations learn to tell stories.
Well, that's what I thought you were going to say first.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But and so that is
How to get their message out.
right.
Well, I think all of the groups that I've talked to want to get their message out, not just because they would like to have people join them, but because of the effect it's going to have when you have these people that can help do what you believe in.
Yeah.
So how do you get it?
Well, one thing that I say is that there's often been, I think, with nonprofits, maybe especially, maybe even foundations, a little bit of a feeling like we've really got to have great numbers. We've got to have data that shows that our intervention saves money, our intervention saves lives. And so to some extent, I think they end up feeling like the most important thing is the data. And there's been a big movement in the foundation world over the last 10 or 15 years for evaluation, and that you should be able to justify your nonprofit the same way you would a business. What effect are you having in the community, and show us those numbers. But when people go too far in that direction, then they lose one of the great assets that nonprofits have. Nonprofits all have great stories. I do some consulting to corporations. They would love to have the kinds of stories that nonprofits have. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, because they reach your heart.
Exactly. And it is the story that reaches people's heart, and then the numbers may reach their head. So my tip, if you want to know how to use story, I think the ideal way to use it, and I'm sure we'll talk more about what makes a good story and that sort of thing, but is to find a good, compelling story that will get to people's hearts, and then link it to a number. Link that. You do that intervention, and it turns out
You don't start with the number.
no.
You start with the story.
A story, and grab people and get them to lean in, just like you do when you're having dinner with someone, just like you do when you're on you strike up a conversation with someone on the plane. I mean, you tell stories. So learn to tell those stories and then link that to a number that says, this isn't just one story. This works, this saves money, this saves lives, this stops recidivism, this affects homelessness, whatever it is, this affects education scores. And then what I will also say is, since you're usually doing this to get something done, link the story and the number, the piece of data, to a call to action. Know when you're going into a meeting or even a chance encounter, think to yourself, what's the call to action? Do I want them to think about joining the board? Then make sure it's like this wonderful story that gets their heart, this number that shows you're for real, and then we'd be interested in talking to you about joining the board. Or you're raising funds, or as I say, you're advocating policy. It's here's the story that grabs them, here's the number that makes it real, and now here's what we need you to do. And I think when people can go into meetings with that in mind, one, I think it'll relax you because you kind of feel like you've got a structure.
Well, and also you know your message.
Yeah.
You know why you're doing it and how it's affecting people better than anything.
Yeah. And one thing that people will say, well, is that my elevator speech? The famous, can you do it in 30 seconds? What I will say is that a good story, and as I say, every nonprofit has them. This family's whose life they changed, this kid that they got to go back to school, whatever it is, those individual stories that grab people's hearts. There's probably a 2-minute version, there's probably a 5-minute version, and then you can come up with that 30-second version. So it's like, know what your good stories are, and then you can develop them so that you have the quick version, the longer version, that sort of thing.
Well, let's say that somebody that sees a need in their schools where their kids go and wants to meet it and is trying to say, I really want to start such and such and such and such. They haven't got any numbers, but they have the passion for the need.
Right.
And so selling that passion first.
And yes, I would say what you'll have at that point is you'll probably have at least 2 stories. One story will be the story about, you know, the problem, right? Which, let me put it this way also. You can often describe something like a report or a case study, but if you can take those same facts and make them a story, people will hear it much differently. So you've got this story about the problem that you want to deal with, and then you probably have a second story, which is why it matters to you. You see? And so if someone's trying to start an organization, I'd say get a good solid story of the problem you're trying to solve, and then a story of why that touches you. Is it some experience you had when you were young that's reflected in this? Is it that something happened to you that was similar to this, which is why you got involved? Because I'm going to give you, there's a fellow named Marshall Gans at Harvard, and he was actually a United Farm Workers organizer for many years with Cesar Chavez, and then he did most of the story work for the Obama '08 campaign, okay, which was very successful. His story, if you think about it, or the story of electing the first black president and all of that, was a great part, I think, of what got him elected. Marshall Gans says, and this I would say to every nonprofit, you want a story of we, a story of us, and a story of now. The story of we is why does it matter to us? The story of, the story of us is why should it matter to you? And then the story of now is why should it matter now? And if you can begin to think that way, why does it matter to me? Why do I think it should matter to you? And why is there an urgency about getting on board or funding us or something? And you can begin to do that, you'll be very powerful.
Yeah, well, you know, I've had so many groups. I think I've been doing this program for about 3 years.
How many shows so far? How many organizations do you know?
Close to a couple hundred, I think.
A couple of hundred. That's, I mean, in this one community.
Yeah. Oh, well, it could go on forever, I think.
know.
But, and so many of them were because of a passion. You know, I mean, we have a young boy in town that's collecting socks for kids that need it because he saw that kids need socks. Another young woman who, on her own, started shoes for school children from the worn out shoes that her son grew out of, but were still good. You know, and now she's serving several schools. So you're right on the passion of the message first. And then also why it's important to you. And then, you know, isn't that important to you too?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
And even if you're just starting an organization, there probably is data that you could use, which will which might come into the part of why is the problem worth solving and why is it urgent that we solve it now? And that's where the data piece, even if you're just starting out, would probably come in. Here's the scope of the problem. Here's how many people. Or if we had just this much, we could do this. Here's how many people we could help if we just had, you know, 25,000, if we just had 100,000,
well, I like your
whatever it is.
three-point plan.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point plan. And, you know, a men's group in town said that there were so many women's groups, they started their own, and it was to feed children because we have a large poverty population in Long Beach, and that would feed children on weekends. And
because they might get their school lunches.
They might get their school lunches.
But on the weekends,
but
what happens?
the weekends they don't have.
And their parents probably are still working those 2 jobs.
Yep, and if working at all, if
Yeah.
they can get the positions. And so they are now with like 5 schools that the principal has identified at each school that there may be 50 kids here that needed it for the weekend. They take it to the schools, and the schools give
So
them
the
out on
cafeteria
weekend.
opens on the weekend?
No. They have it boxed up.
Oh, boxed
Everything
lunches.
is everything. Not box lunches. I don't know what it is. It's boxed food for the
Yeah.
weekend, and give big sacks to the kids to take home for the weekend.
Fabulous.
So you know, that's one of the reasons I love doing the show, because I'm so proud of Long Beach and the number of people that are so helpful to whatever the need may be.
Yeah.
And usually the need comes from their heart on some personal experience that
exactly.
they've had.
And that's gold, really. That's that
Yeah.
story that is that founding story.
Yeah.
And every organization
Yeah.
probably has a founding story because it usually starts from a heart being touched.
You told me about one of the positions that you did online with libraries where they did this. They did
Yes.
the same thing.
Yes.
And you didn't really go there because it was on the East Coast.
What I did was I did a talk at the National Conference of the Urban Library Council. I keynoted one of their national conferences, and then they approached me and they said, could we do a series of webinars? So
Huh?
to
Is that
anyone,
what they call them? Webinars?
Yes. If anyone is new to that term, as Beverly is,
Yeah.
what that means is it's like a seminar, but it takes place on the web. And then what we did was we actually found 5 different big urban library systems. San Francisco, Los Angeles, Charlotte, North Carolina, I think, and 2 others, I can't remember right now. And the curriculum would be done, Tuesdays at 9 or something. We'd all get on the computer, and they could see me, and we could speak to each other. And then and I think this is, not to go into this in too much depth, but one of the great things about it is that in the course of that week, since they were working on stories, they could write a story and put it online, and the other members could see it and give them feedback, and then we come back on the next week and we talk about what they've done. So that, yeah, it is possible, and of course the money that's saved.
Oh, wow.
In other words,
Travel.
exactly,
And
travel,
time,
hotels, even
time.
just meeting time. If people can be in their own office
Yeah.
and participate, so some things.
And they get the message across about the libraries.
Exactly. And let me just share one thing about the library, which was interesting. Libraries, very often when people say we want to tell our big story, this isn't just our individual story about this person who had their life transformed, but it's kind of what's the purpose of a library? And they were having trouble because everyone thinks they know what a library is. Everyone knows the story of a library. It's that first book that you went when your mom and dad took you, and then your teacher would take you. And everybody thinks it's that place where you go to get books. Well, it turns out now a library is so much more than that.
Oh, yeah.
And what I told them is, your thing is, you've got to
Get the new
overcome
message.
your old story. Your old story is too well known. Everyone takes it for granted. They know, and you've got to tell them that it's where people learn how to become citizens. It's where people learn how to get jobs. It's where seniors learn how computer skills. It's a very different thing, but it's still an essential part of the community.
That's right. That's wonderful. Well, bringing it back locally, when you were talking about messages, let's say that you have a group of people that are working with some project that they're working on. What do you do to get that message out of them?
Oh, okay, to pull it out.
Yeah.
Well, I think that probably is an interview process.
Oh, okay.
In other words, my guess
You know,
is
what question do you ask?
that's,
Like,
well,
what are you doing this for? Or,
that would be, yeah.
Okay.
What led you to this?
Yeah, what motivated you?
Yeah, what motivated you? Is there an experience, if I'm really trying to nail down the story, is there a particular experience, a moment when you said, God, I got to do something about this?
Yeah.
Tell us what that was. Then there might be some, now here's one thing I often say also. If you set a goal and you went step 1, step 2, step 3, and you did it and did it and did it and you succeeded, that would be a great accomplishment, but it wouldn't be a great story because what we like in our stories is obstacles, right? The overcoming of obstacles. If you think about all the classic stories, it's that your hero, whether it's Sir Lancelot or it's Moses or, you name it, it's the overcoming the obstacles, which is where we really get involved. So when you're thinking of your story, don't make it sound like it was smooth and easy. Well, then I had to learn this, and then I had to find a partner
But
to
that's
help me
after
do
you
this.
started.
Yeah, but I mean, even if you're starting, it will still be, in other words,
What's the process?
so what was that moment
Okay.
that you felt, and then what
Had to
happened?
be done.
And
Okay.
then what happened? And Ira Glass, the fellow with This American Life, every This American Life story follows a particular format, and it's very helpful for folks to think about. Then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, this is what it means. He says it's really important, And I think for nonprofits, very much so. Tell them, get them involved in the story, and then tell them what the lesson is. Tell them what you learned. Tell them what that means, and then that led you to the next thing. And then this happened, then this happened, and that's what this means. So that you keep people going with you along the journey of your story. So you're saying someone just wants to start something. So the first question, if I'm trying to get it, would be, what was that moment?
That you decided this had to be done.
What touched you and you said, and then what did you do? And then what did you come up against? How did you overcome it? Did you, and if you think again, I mean, it's not at all crazy to think about these as little movies. You know, did you end up needing a partner? You know, just as in so many movies,
Or a
it's
board.
like you're on your own, and then you find this ally, and now you can go forward. You know,
And you need other people, bodies to help.
Exactly, you need a team. So how did you do that? Who joined? Who was the one that sort of encouraged you? What was that moment when you thought you would quit? Those kind of moments when you thought, this is too much, I can't do it. And then something happened. When those kind of things happen, those make stories rich. Those are the ones people lean in and, you know, what happened. Because what we want in a story is we want to know what happens next.
Well, you know, I can tell that you have been used to working with, not used to, but that you have worked with groups that have groups already established, and how do you work it out a little bit further. And but just in my programs here, I've had a lot of people who are just started out, you know, and they don't know the next step. So they've got this first step, but they almost didn't know where to go. But,
Right.
But in the city of Long Beach, we really had some good programs as far as, you know, if it's for children, they usually try to work with the schools. If it's for people that are ill, or abused or something, they work with the agencies that are already established and show how it can help. But, you know, Terrence, these things go so fast, and you've got so much to say about things, and I know that the things that you have done have given you a real background, and that you're very busy in making sure that this message gets across. And so I'm just delighted that we've had a chance to talk. It seems to have gone very fast.
It flew.
I know, it's really gone very fast. We'll be right back. We just took a moment here, and this was for some full disclosure, and that Terrence McNally is my son-in-law, and I'm very proud of him. And sitting next to him is my daughter, Teresa, and my wonderful grandson, Nolan. And I've been doing this now for about 3 years, and they've never been visible. And I've always wanted them to be. So you just got to take a real look now, because they're never going to do it again. And not sure that they're glad now. But anyway, I love you guys, and I'm so proud of all of you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching.